The wind whispered through the trees outside, a restless rustle that swept against the windows like fingers trailing across glass. Claire Dawson stirred beneath the warmth of her thick duvet, eyes fluttering in the hazy threshold between sleep and wakefulness. The clock on her nightstand read 3:17 a.m., its red digits casting a faint glow that flickered across the bedroom walls. It was cold, too cold for October. She tucked the blanket higher around her shoulders. Something pulled at her attention. It was faint at first, a low hum echoing from somewhere within the house. A rhythm, muffled but familiar. Then, more clearly, the soft clink of ceramic against wood, a cabinet shutting, the rush of water from the faucet. Someone was in the kitchen. Claire blinked slowly. The sound had a mundane cadence, like someone preparing a late-night snack or rinsing out a mug. But she and her husband Daniel had gone to bed before midnight. He'd fallen asleep quickly the way he always did. Deep, steady breathing within minutes, a subtle snore that rose and fell beside her like ocean waves. The sounds continued. Footsteps, not fast, not stumbling, measured, calm, intentional. Claire turned her head slowly toward the other side of the bed. The outline of Daniel's body was still there, unmoving. The covers pulled slightly around his shoulder. She squinted, waiting for her eyes to adjust. She could make out the slope of his nose, the faint curl of his dark hair. He hadn't moved. A chill prickled across her arms. Maybe he had gotten up and returned to bed, and the sounds were echoes from earlier? But that made no sense. The faucet was still running. She could hear it clearly now, as if someone had just turned it on again. She sat up, hesitant, pushing the blanket off her shoulders. The floor was cold beneath her bare feet as she swung her legs off the bed. A faint creak beneath her weight echoed through the room, and she paused, watching for any shift from Daniel. Nothing. His breathing remained deep, rhythmic. The sound of footsteps again, softer now. Then unmistakably a voice, a man's voice, her husband's voice. "Honey, I thought you were asleep," it said, calm and casual. Claire froze. She looked again at the bed. Daniel hadn't moved. His back was still turned to her, his breathing slow and even. But the voice came again. "I made you some tea." She couldn't breathe, couldn't blink. Her body had gone stiff, locked in a confusion too sharp to rationalize. She stood up, slow and silent, and stepped toward the doorway. The hallway beyond was dark, lit only by the faint ambient glow from the nightlight in the corner of the hallway near the bathroom. The kitchen was farther down, past the dining nook, beyond her line of sight. The air felt wrong, thicker than usual, like the house itself was holding its breath. Claire crept forward, her hand trailing along the wall. The faint scent of peppermint tea wafted through the hallway, familiar and strangely comforting. Daniel always made that kind when she couldn't sleep. That exact scent, that exact tea. A shadow shifted at the end of the hallway, then the sound of chair dragging slightly against the tile floor. Claire paused near the corner, heart hammering. She risked a glance around the edge. The kitchen light was on, casting a soft amber glow across the tile. She could see the edge of the countertop, the far side of the refrigerator, the curve of the dining room table. But not the source of the voice, not whoever or whatever was standing in her kitchen, using her husband's voice. She stepped back, carefully, slowly, her pulse thudding behind her eyes. A creak in the floor behind her made her whip around, but there was nothing, just shadows and silence. She turned back toward the kitchen. The voice came again, softer now, as if it had moved farther into the room. "I left your favorite mug out, the one with the flowers." Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't possible. That voice was too exact. The same cadence, the same tone. She would swear on anything that it was Daniel speaking. But Daniel hadn't moved from the bed. The hallway felt like it was stretching longer the more she looked at it, as though the house were subtly shifting in the dark, rearranging itself in ways she couldn't see. She took a single step forward, then another. The scent of tea grew stronger, mixed now with something else, something faint and metallic beneath the mint. She reached the threshold of the kitchen. Her fingers brushed the edge of the wall. The room was empty. The tea kettle sat on the stove, steaming gently. A white mug sat on the counter beside it, the one with painted blue flowers. Her favorite. A chair was slightly pulled out from the table. The faucet was still dripping, a rhythmic plink that echoed in the silence. No one was there. But someone had been. Something had. She reached out, trembling, and touched the mug. It was warm. The chair creaked again. She spun around, heart leaping into her throat, but still no one. She backed out of the kitchen slowly, not turning her back, eyes scanning every inch of the room. The shadows didn't move. Nothing followed. As she retreated down the hallway, she glanced toward the bedroom. Daniel hadn't moved, still sleeping, still turned away. She hesitated at the bedroom door. Part of her wanted to wake him, shake him, scream. But another part, an older, deeper instinct, kept her still. Something was wrong with the silence now. It had weight to it. The kind of silence that didn't belong in a house filled with the soft sounds of sleep and tea and footsteps. She stepped into the room, closed the door, but didn't go back to bed. Not yet. She sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at Daniel's back, watching the slow rise and fall of his breath. A thought slithered up from the pit of her mind, cold and cruel. What if it's not him? She shook the idea away. Of course it was him. She could see him, could hear him breathing. She'd watched him fall asleep. But the voice. She got back up and paced quietly to the window. The wind had died down, the night now too still. No cars on the road, no distant barking dogs, no shifting branches. Just the faint tick of the wall clock and the ever-so-soft drip of the kitchen faucet, which somehow she could still hear, even with the bedroom door shut. It was too quiet, too still, as though the house were listening, waiting. She returned to the bed but didn't lie down. Instead, she sat with her back to the headboard, eyes fixed on the door. She didn't turn off the lamp. Time passed, minutes, an hour. She didn't know. Her body was numb, her thoughts coiled into loops. Eventually, her eyes grew heavy, her head tilted to the side. Sleep crept in like fog through an open window, slow and insistent. The last thing she heard before drifting off was the soft creak of a cabinet in the kitchen. And then, silence. The morning light seeped through the curtains, casting a pale glow across the bedroom. Claire stirred, her body stiff from sleeping upright against the headboard. She blinked, disoriented, the events of the night before flooding back with a jolt. The voice in the kitchen, the tea, the empty room. She turned to look at Daniel. He was still asleep, his face peaceful, unaware of the turmoil that had gripped her. She reached out, hesitating for a moment before gently shaking his shoulder. Daniel groaned softly, turning to face her. His eyes fluttered open, meeting hers with a sleepy smile. "Morning?" he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. Claire studied him, searching for any sign of something amiss. But he looked the same, his tousled hair, the slight stubble on his chin, the warmth in his eyes. "Did you get up last night?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel frowned, rubbing his eyes. Number why? She hesitated, unsure of how to explain without sounding irrational. "I thought I heard you in the kitchen, making tea." He shook his head slowly. "I didn't get up. Must have been a dream." Claire nodded, forcing a smile. Maybe it had been a dream. A vivid, unsettling dream. She tried to shake off the lingering unease as she got out of bed and headed to the bathroom. The day passed in a blur. Claire went through the motions, making breakfast, tidying up, running errands. But her mind kept drifting back to the night before. The voice, the tea, the empty kitchen. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That evening, as they settled in to watch a movie, Claire found herself glancing at Daniel repeatedly. He seemed normal, laughing at the funny parts, commenting on the plot. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Subtle, almost imperceptible differences. His laugh seemed a bit too forced, his comments a bit too rehearsed. She told herself she was being paranoid, that the events of the night before had unsettled her more than she realized. As the movie ended and they prepared for bed, Claire resolved to put the incident behind her. She climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin, and closed her eyes. But sleep didn't come easily. She lay awake, listening to the sounds of the house, the creaks and groans, the occasional gust of wind against the windows. Every noise seemed amplified, every shadow more menacing. Just as she was beginning to drift off, a sound jolted her awake. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate footsteps coming from the hallway. Claire sat up, heart pounding. She glanced at Daniel. He was still beside her, eyes closed, breathing steadily. The footsteps continued, growing louder as they approached the bedroom door. Claire held her breath, eyes fixed on the door. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a soft knock. Claire's heart raced. She reached over, shaking Daniel's shoulder. "Daniel!" she whispered urgently. He stirred, groaning softly. "What is it?" "Someone's at the door," she whispered. He sat up, frowning. "What?" Before she could respond, the door creaked open slowly, but no one was there. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the empty doorway, her mind racing. Daniel got out of bed, walking over to the door and peering into the hallway. "There's no one here," he said, turning back to her. Claire got out of bed, joining him at the doorway. She looked down the hallway. Empty. They checked the rest of the house together, room by room. Everything was in its place. No signs of an intruder. As they returned to the bedroom, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The next day, Claire decided to do some research. She searched online for any reports of break-ins or strange occurrences in the neighborhood. Nothing. She considered installing security cameras, but Daniel dismissed the idea, insisting that it was unnecessary. That night, Claire lay awake again, listening. At 3:17 a.m., the same time as before, she heard it, the voice. "Honey, I thought you were asleep." Claire sat up, heart pounding. She turned to Daniel, still asleep. She got out of bed, creeping toward the hallway. The voice came again. "I made you some tea." She reached the kitchen. Empty. The mug was there again, steaming. Claire backed away slowly, retreating to the bedroom. She locked the door, climbing back into bed and pulling the covers over her head. The next morning, she confronted Daniel. "I heard it again," she said. "The voice, the tea." Daniel looked concerned. "Are you sure you're not dreaming?" "I'm not," she insisted. "It's real." He sighed. "Maybe we should talk to someone, a therapist." Claire nodded reluctantly. Maybe she was losing her mind. But that night, the voice came again, and this time it said something different. "Honey, who is that with you?" Claire froze. She turned to Daniel. He was awake, staring at her. "You heard it too," she whispered. He nodded slowly. They got out of bed together, creeping toward the kitchen. The mug was there, steaming. But this time, there was something else. A note. In Daniel's handwriting. "Don't trust him." Claire stared at the note, her mind reeling. She turned to Daniel, but he was gone. She spun around, searching the house. No sign of him. She returned to the kitchen, staring at the note. Then the voice came again. "Honey, I thought you were asleep." Claire turned slowly. Daniel stood in the doorway, smiling, but his eyes were wrong, cold, empty. She backed away slowly, heart pounding. The figure stepped forward. "Who is that with you?" it asked again. Claire turned and ran, fleeing the house. She didn't stop until she reached the street, gasping for breath. She looked back at the house, dark, silent. She never returned. The sun had just begun to rise, casting long orange fingers across the quiet streets as Claire wandered, barefoot and trembling. Her breath clouded in the morning air, her skin chilled from the dew that clung to the grass beneath her feet. She didn't know how far she'd run. Time and distance had collapsed into panic. She reached the edge of the neighborhood where the trimmed lawns ended and the trees grew thicker. Somewhere in her mind, she registered the chirping of birds and the rustling of wind through leaves, but none of it touched her. She was trying to breathe, trying to think. "Don't trust him." Those words echoed over and over. She clutched the note in her hand, crumpled and damp with sweat. Daniel's handwriting, she knew it like her own. But if Daniel had written it, then who had been lying in bed beside her? Who had spoken in his voice? Who had looked at her with his eyes but without the warmth? A car passed by on the main road, and she stumbled toward it, waving frantically. It didn't stop. She wandered until she found a diner, an old 24-hour place with flickering neon signs and cracked linoleum floors. She slid into a booth in the back, asked for coffee with a voice that didn't sound like hers, and stared at the black liquid without drinking. When her hands finally stopped shaking, she borrowed a phone. The police were polite, distant. They searched the house when they arrived. Daniel wasn't there. His car still sat in the driveway. His wallet and keys were gone. No signs of forced entry, no footprints other than hers, no note. The mug in the kitchen was gone too. They asked if she wanted to file a missing person report. She hesitated. Then she said no. Instead, Claire moved in with her sister for a while. They lived in a small apartment in the city, far from the house and the quiet streets. It was loud, full of strangers and traffic and light. Safe. She got a part-time job, started seeing a therapist. She told herself it had been stress, trauma, a breakdown triggered by grief, or something buried deep. But some nights, she still heard the voice, faint, like a whisper under the floorboards. "Honey, I thought you were asleep." She tried to ignore it, tried to convince herself it was nothing. But then, 3 weeks later, she saw Daniel. She was leaving a grocery store juggling paper bags when she saw him across the street. Just for a second, standing still in the crowd. Same jacket, same hair, same way of standing. She dropped her groceries and ran. But by the time she crossed the street, he was gone. A week later, she saw him again, in the reflection of a shop window, standing behind her. But when she turned, there was no one. She started leaving notes for herself, little reminders. That's not him. If he comes back, don't believe him. He will try to act normal. He is not Daniel. And then one night, she got a message. It was slipped under her sister's apartment door, just a scrap of paper folded 3 times. Her sister hadn't seen anyone. No security camera caught anything. She opened the note with trembling fingers. Please come home. I'm still here. I never left. It was Daniel's handwriting. Claire didn't sleep that night. She tried to reason with herself. Maybe it was a sick prank, someone trying to torment her. But how would anyone else have that handwriting? The way he looped his L's, the slight slant in his lowercase n's. It was too perfect. The next morning, she left the apartment before sunrise. She didn't tell her sister. She didn't pack anything. She just got on a bus and headed back toward the house she swore she'd never see again. It looked exactly the same. The garden was overgrown, the mailbox slightly ajar. But the curtains were still drawn the way she had left them. Her key still worked. The moment she stepped inside, it felt like stepping back into a memory, one that had been waiting, patient and still. The air was stale, but not cold. The living room was clean. No dust, no signs of abandonment. There was a fresh mug on the table, steam rising, peppermint. Claire backed away, heart racing. Then she heard it, a soft thump upstairs. She didn't move at first. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but the part of her that still remembered Daniel's laugh, his voice, the way his hand felt in hers, that part whispered back, what if he's telling the truth? She moved slowly up the stairs. Each step creaked under her weight, just as it always had. At the top of the stairs, she paused. The hallway stretched ahead, her bedroom door slightly ajar. Light flickered from within, faint and flickering like candlelight. She pushed the door open. Daniel was there, sitting on the bed. He looked pale, thinner, but alive, real. Claire, he said softly. She froze. He stood slowly, hands raised like he was afraid she'd bolt. It wasn't me in the kitchen, he said. That night, I heard it too. She couldn't breathe. Something came into the house, he said. It pretended to be me. I don't know how, but it took my place. I've been stuck here in the dark. Claire's voice barely worked. How do I know it's really you? Daniel stepped forward. Because of what I whispered the night we got engaged, under the stars, in your parents' backyard. Claire's eyes widened. No one else knew, not even her sister. He repeated the words. She began to cry. Daniel embraced her, and for a moment, it felt right, safe. But then she noticed something. The mirror across the room. There were 2 figures in the reflection, but only one had a face. The other was a blur, shifting, smiling. Claire pulled back. The reflection mimicked her hesitation, but Daniel did not. Claire? He asked, eyes narrowing. She stepped away slowly, her back hitting the dresser. The reflection behind him rippled like heat off asphalt. Then the figure smiled, wider than Daniel's mouth could stretch. Too wide, too sharp. Why are you backing away? the thing in front of her asked. She ran, down the stairs, through the kitchen. The front door slammed shut before she could reach it. Behind her, the voice changed, deepened. I was so close. Claire turned, trembling. The thing wore Daniel's face, his clothes, but it stood wrong now. Limbs too long, neck too still, eyes that didn't blink. I gave you comfort, it said, warmth, familiarity, and you still chose pain. Claire reached into the drawer behind her, grabbing the iron poker from the fireplace set. I want him back, she said. The creature tilted its head. He's gone. Then you'll go too. It rushed at her, but she swung. Metal met flesh, or something like it, and the creature screamed. Not Daniel's voice anymore, a shriek like tearing metal. She struck again, and again, and again. When it fell, it didn't vanish. It crumbled, skin flaked like ash, bones snapped like dry twigs. Within seconds, there was nothing but a black stain on the wooden floor. Silence fell, and then a voice, faint, from upstairs. Claire? She moved slowly back up the stairs, into the bedroom. Daniel was there, another Daniel. But this one was pale, weak, curled in the corner, blinking against the light like a man who hadn't seen the sun in weeks. She didn't ask questions. She helped him up. He collapsed into her arms. He didn't feel like the other one. He was warm, shaking, real. Together, they left the house. They never returned. The stain in the kitchen never went away, no matter how many times the new owners scrubbed it. The house sold twice after Claire and Daniel left. Both couples moved out within months. One disappeared entirely. Claire and Daniel changed their names, moved across the country, tried to start fresh. But some nights, the voice comes back. Whispers from dark corners. A hand that touches a shoulder just before sleep and pulls away when the lights turn on. They don't speak of the house. They don't speak of the thing that wore his face. But sometimes, when Daniel is quiet, staring out the window at night, Claire wonders, what if it followed us? And then, behind her, she hears the faintest whisper. Honey? Who is that with you?